Christine, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to have you.
Aneta, I'm so excited to be here too.
I spent some time really taking a look at your website and your Instagram, and I was so excited for our conversation. And I think my audience too are always very curious about wellness and holistic healing. And I'm curious, tell me a little bit more about when you decided that this was going to be your life's work, where you're focusing in on healing and really identifying healing at the root level.
Well, it actually came at the ultimate timeout that we all received. It was March 12th of 2020. I had been a corporate turnaround specialist for most of my career. So fixing companies, like figuring out how to get the people, processes, technology all to flow so they could meet the business outcomes. And on that day, I got a call letting me know that my services were no longer needed. I was in complete shock because I had just gotten a performance bonus. I was on year one of a planned 3-year turnaround. And I was actually in a doctor's office because my now husband was having a biopsy done on his prostate at the time. So it was a complete shock of my life. I had never been fired before. I had always met or exceeded expectations. And so I texted the COO, who was my boss, and I said, I just got fired. He says, me too. I'm like, what? So what had happened is we had prepared the board deck to show that had we been able to hire the people we'd been asking for in the fourth quarter, not only would we have met the objective in the Q1, but we would have exceeded it. So basically what the CEO did is he walked in, took our board deck, fired the two of us, and told the board that we didn't hire enough people, even though he was the one telling us to hold the line on expenses. And he went on a hiring spree. Karma's got a way of working things out. He was investigated by the board, removed from office. They put a crony in his place, and they summarily ran the company into the ground. So it no longer exists today. So what happened to me?
Yeah,
All
what
right.
did you do?
It was the ultimate timeout. So I really feel like the divine plucked me out of corporate America, or I'd probably still be there. I had a 9-month runway because of the way I was let go. I had a decent exit package to allow me time to really consider what I really want to do with my life. Because I think a lot of us get caught in that zone of excellence, as Brandon Burchard would say. It's the place where people, you identify with that role, people see you that way, you get paid really well for it, but something's missing. And you get to a point in your life where you want to step into your zone of genius. And so what happened to me, I had this incredibly powerful meditation. I just had tears streaming down my face. And I had this realization that it was time to bring the soul intelligence method into the world. That literally my soul intelligence was screaming at me that I couldn't go back into corporate America. And so, doing a lot of meditation and journaling, I really believe I received the divine downloads to put the soul intelligence method together.
Oh. So for those that maybe don't meditate, I've had this type of experience before. So I got the nudge to write my first and second book. But talk a little bit about this meditation. So you're sitting in meditation, and did the term soul intelligence method like come to you? Like what came first? Was it a vision of what it was? Was it the words? What did it look like?
Well, the first thing that came through was just this soul, like this image of going back into corporate, right? And my whole body, like I had a visceral reaction
Mhm.
to that idea. So I knew that was completely off the table. Well, nobody was hiring at that point anyway. They're all trying to figure out how do we work from home. Now,
Yeah.
fortunately for me, I had always worked from home and traveled, so it wasn't as much of a shock. But what came through was I had learned how to use a book of charts and a pendulum about 20 years prior. And it was a very religious type of a system. So it didn't quite fit who I was. I'm just very restrictive. And I got this image of putting a book of charts together that actually were meant to help move energy, right? And to help people heal physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and energetically. And so that's really what I saw. I saw me actually putting the charts together and then had a message drop in that you need to follow your soul intelligence. And I went, oh, yeah, that's what it should be called. It should be called the soul intelligence method. And so that's really where it dropped in.
Mm. So tell us more. What is the soul intelligence method?
Well, sure. It's a book of charts and a pendulum, and there's lots of different charts. So I've got physical healing charts. There's mental and emotional charts. There's self-limiting beliefs. There's things about career and work. There's charts that can help us shift energy throughout our energy centers, the chakras. So it's a book of charts that's about 30 charts in total, plus prayers and things to help release energy. So I think probably for me to kind of back up just a minute, the reason the work works is because it's founded in a method that was documented in the 90s by Dr. Alexander Lowen, which is called bioenergetics. And what that says is that if you're not feeling well physically, then mentally and emotionally, you're probably not doing so hot either, which is kind of common sense, right? But when you think about 95% of doctors' visits are for chronic conditions, things that just won't heal,
Mm-hmm.
there's got to be an underlying reason for that to stay stuck in the physical body. And so I really believe our physical body is really the barometer to our subconscious mind, where all of that trapped energy and emotion is stuck. And it comes in the form of old patterns and archetypes and old traumas and self-limiting beliefs. I'm sure people are familiar with the work Does the Body Lie and all of the wonderful things that we've learned, even with Louise Hay, about what the underlying root cause to dis-ease in the body is. Because essentially, emotion is energy in motion. And when energy is no longer in motion, that's when it pools within the body and it causes dis-ease, dysfunction, or dissonance in the frequency. And that's when you go to the doctor. So what I do is I partner in the field of functional medicine with healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners, to really get to that underlying condition, that emotional state that is holding somebody locked in place to dis-ease, so that we can then pull that energy up and out of the body and release it. Because once energy is created, it has to be transmuted into something else. Energy can't be destroyed. We know that. And once I do that, then they work with naturopathic doctors to actually take the right nutraceuticals, vitamins, supplements, things they need to get their body to heal. And so it's an incredible opportunity, like, to help people heal on every level, physically, mentally, emotionally, sometimes spiritually, in all ways, energetically. And I think people forget, like, we're energetic beings. Like, if we go back to elementary school, we're all protons, neutrons, electrons, an electromagnetic field. We just forget that because we're physical, we're corporal. People are always like, well, how do you do this remote work, like over Zoom? Don't you have to be near the person? And I said, well, how many things do you stream onto your phone? How does that happen? It is frequency and information that travels to a receiver and it shows up on your phone or your laptop or the television. It's the same thing with our bodies. It comes in either through our ears, if it's music or vibration, or the pineal gland. It's information that's going in or coming out. So we receive that. And so I think it's getting people to remember that we are energy and everything is energy.
Yeah, it's amazing. I absolutely believe in that we are energetic beings and that all of the things that we feel physically are also connected to the other parts of us. We cannot compartmentalize. I think we've tried for too long, and Western medicine, I think, has really kept things separate. So
Mm.
when you're working with, you said doctors and nurses, like, how do you find folks who are open to talking about doing the healing more holistically?
Well, that's the coolest part. I get the opportunity to work with functional medicine and integrative medicine providers because they're already open to holistic healing. The woman who wrote the foreword to my book is a triple board certified MD, but she's also a naturopathic doctor. I'm writing a chapter in a book for an OBGYN who's also a naturopathic doctor. I think people are starting to recognize there's a spectrum of healing. It's not one or the other. Sometimes you do need medication to get the body to adjust, but the goal is to give it what it needs so it can heal itself. It's actually built to do that. And so if you can do that in a more natural way, that's a better way to do it, because a lot of our medications just mask symptoms. They don't actually solve the problem. And so that's what I love about functional medicine. They really go to the root cause of the problem. And most of them start in the gut. I mean, one of the things I wrote about in the book is that most things happen in the gut and start in the gut. Because if you think about what the stomach does, it has two functions. It holds food and processes food. It also holds emotions or processes emotions, or doesn't. If you
Mm.
think about it, you're doing something, you're really nervous, like you get butterflies in your stomach, or Something really bad happens, you feel like you got punched in the gut. That is our emotional center. And if you think about your chakras, the third chakra is all about self esteem, how you show up in the world, how you feel about you, and those interpersonal relationships. And when you think about it, life's all about relationships. No wonder all that serotonin's produced in our gut, the happy
Yeah.
hormone. All the good and bad bugs reside in there.
Mm.
So, what energy is going in there, and what are we like ignoring or processing? And so, Hippocrates said 2,000 years ago, health begins and ends in the gut.
Yeah. And also with the overprocessed foods, with the
Oh, yeah.
depletion of the soil that we have right now, with genetically modified ingredients, with people wiping out all of the good bugs in their gut. Anyway, like what has the impact then been for us energetically as humans?
Well, it's interesting when we start looking at what are all the foundational reasons people get dis-ease, right, in the body. The first one, the biggest one, probably is stress. Okay, and we're all in fight or flight most of the time, most of the day. Even if it's just something like you get this alert on your phone, it can make you crazy. So it's that stress. Because what stress does is it lowers the body's immune system, so we're more susceptible to dis-ease in the body. So that's the first thing. And stress often causes inflammation throughout the body, which is also something that tends to bloom. So, monitoring our stress and the stressful situations, what are the ways we can manage stress? The next one's toxicity. You kind of touched on some of that, right? The glyphosate or the Roundup that's used in the soil. When we talk about toxicity, it's not just the chemicals that we use in our home. It's like, what are we listening to? What are we watching? Who
Oh,
do we
yeah.
hang out with, right?
Yep.
When that phone rings and you see that person's name, you're you like cringing to pick it up. That's like a great sign of an energy vampire. You don't want to
Yeah.
do that, right? So managing that toxicity, to poor nutrition, to get to your point about the soil. It's been depleted since what, the 40s, something like that. So we have to supplement in order to get what we need because we're not going to get it even from the best foods. And then lack of movement is usually something as well. Sitting's become the new smoking because we don't move as much as we need to do. And then the last one's the genetic component, but that's only about 5%. And typically, if someone has something that's come through genetically or generationally, it's usually part of their life plan, their life purpose. They're here to do something. And that's why that is locked in place. But the rest of those things I just mentioned are all within our control. And that's the good news that we can actually shift it and get our health to improve.
When people contact you, do they usually work with you because they come directly to you and then you connect them with the naturopaths? Or do they sometimes go to some of these other doctors and then they also bring you in to help supplement what they're working on?
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Yes. Yes to both. I figured it might be.
Yes, it's really cool. I actually did a webinar recently on how the future of medicine is frequency. And I shared a number of case studies where I had done some energy work for someone, and then how I pulled in a naturopathic doctor once I was able to pull what was out of the body. For example, I started to work with a gentleman, and he and his wife were just at their wits' end. It was like, we've tried everything, traditional medicine, naturopath. We don't, you're like our last hope. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know?
Mhm.
So this gentleman had a lot of pain in his stomach and in his thoracic area, in his chest. And his breathing was labored. He had a nose cannula on. So it's like taking oxygen as I see him on the Zoom. And I can tell he was in a lot of pain. As I go through the session, I can see his pain lessening. I can see him breathing normally. I can see him relaxed. And what I found in the session is that most of the energy that was stuck in his stomach wasn't even his. It had been in place for 50 years since the Vietnam War. He
Wow.
had the energy of his entire company that he was holding in place in his stomach. And so I was able to get the energy up and out. And so then I had him work with a naturopathic doctor and pharmacist who realized the medications he'd been taking for depression and anxiety had the traditional medicine usually thinks more is better. So your body gets used to the amount that you're being given, so they give you more, is kind of the model. Whereas in naturopathic medicine, you usually need less over time because your body adapts and heals. Anyway, his body had been producing too much serotonin, which was causing the pain in his stomach because that's where most of the happy hormones produced is in your stomach. And so we had to give him something we call Calm Day, which is from Nutritional Frontiers, is a nutraceutical company that I work with. And that has a lot of GABA in it, and that counteracted the symptoms. And so, us partnering together, this man is finally out of pain, and he's been in and out of hospitals with a quote unquote phantom pain that nobody could solve.
Wow.
So it's pretty incredible when you partner all these great minds to really heal someone. I'm not the first person to say the future medicine is frequency. That was actually Einstein, but it is really coming to pass. I just reported the Cleveland Clinic is actually recognizing energy medicine right now, which is freaking fantastic. And I just read several studies that have been done where using frequency, they're able to break the outer cellular membrane of cancer cells. And they duplicated that on human cells in the petri dish, basically. And they did the vibration therapy with the mice that they injected. And 99% of the mice did not have a recurrence of cancer after doing the frequency because the cells are vibrating healthy now. They destroyed the ones that were cancerous. So I think it's just people becoming more aware of what's really going on and how our bodies really truly function. I mean, we're mostly water. We conduct electricity. Our heart actually is like this vortex that has a 6 foot wide energy field around it. It's infinitely more powerful than the brain that only has
Yeah.
a 2 foot wide energy field. So we were taught, like, stuff your emotions. There's no crying in baseball, like the whole time in corporate America. And that is the worst thing you can do. The absolute
Absolutely.
worst.
It's so interesting because I think I remember reading even that there were studies done maybe in the 50s earlier where with sound therapy, which was vibration,
Yes.
and that there actually were some early cancer studies which were then I think by the American Medicine, I forget the organization, who basically said, we're not going to pursue this any longer. But I think there were some earlier trials like decades ago that actually proved that vibration and sound and frequency was able to help from a cancer perspective for
Yeah.
healing.
Rice University did a study, and I cited a couple different other studies as well, but that's one that's kind of top of mind. They just produced that, I think, in 23. So it's kind of interesting. Illness is big business in our country.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think a lot of things, when you do the research and you look back to the time of Rockefeller and others, and that's when these oil barons started the pharmacy, big pharma, and they provided funding to the medical schools to make sure that they were taught in a certain way. And so any naturopathic methods were pushed to the side and debunked, basically said, nope, they don't work. You have to do it this way. So it's fascinating when you start doing the research. You really go, wow, wow.
Yeah, it's interesting. And people are very protective of that. Like any questioning of something is just considered very woo woo, or you're a quack if you start to look at more natural methods, things that have been around for thousands of years. I remember when my kids were small, my youngest would get ear infections and they wanted to put tubes in. And I said, let me go to Dr. Andrew Weil's website and found some natural ways to make some oil drops with garlic. And we went back in 10 days. Her ear infections were completely cleared up. There was no redness, there was no sign of it. And the doctor's like, what'd you do? And I was like, well, I chopped up some garlic and I put it in oil and let it stay overnight. And I took the garlic out and I warmed up the oil and put drops. And he was like, yeah, I'm sure that wasn't it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm sure it was. That's the only thing I did.
Yeah.
But it's much easier to dismiss something like that, something that actually doesn't cost you anything to do. One of the other things that I'm really fascinated about with your method, and I would love for you to go a little bit deeper, is that you say that you don't actually have to revisit the trauma or the
Hmm.
pain itself in
Hmm.
order to transmute it, the energy. So tell me a little bit more about what that looks like. Some people, I think, are really scared of having to relive something that they either are aware of or may not even be aware of that could be stored in their body.
Absolutely. So I equate it to therapy. When you go to therapy, the idea is to talk about what happened, when it happened, and as much as you can recall, because what they're trying to do is to bring that emotion up and out of the body. So to elicit a reaction. So whether that's screaming, crying, whatever we need to do to get it out. And what I do with the method is I'm able to put, more or less, I set up a sacred space. So we make sure that whatever we shift, the intention is that it goes back to the divine for transmutation into love and light, as opposed to landing on any other person, place, or thing. Because look, we're electromagnetic beings, so we attract energy, things. So people around, a lot of what I clear for people is not even theirs.
Yeah.
It's coming from someone they're close to, or an incident that happened they didn't even realize had impacted them. So, but anyway, just in terms of how this works, I mean, I can't say that every once in a while someone will cry just because it's a release, but it's, you don't have to go back to that incident or visualize or have an impact. I'm going to go, oh, this is when this happened. For example, I just actually just worked with a pharmacist who has been suffering with a debilitating disease. She came to a group intelligence session that I did. I offered free group session once a month typically. She said that it was the first time in 3 years she had felt peace.
Mm.
And so we did a one-on-one then. I did a follow-up with her, and I saw that she had been held at gunpoint in her pharmacy about 10 years ago. And she's like, oh my God, I remember when that happened. And I said, well, that's what lowered your immune system. You were in such fear for so long that it was going to happen again. It crashed your immune system. And now we're working together energetically to shift things up and out of the body. And she's also partnering with another naturopathic doctor to help her with symptoms from long haul COVID that won't heal, won't shift up and out of the body, as well as a chronic fatigue syndrome that also started and amplified when that incident happened. So it's stuff like that. Like she didn't have to relive the trauma, but it was like this realization of something that was in her subconscious came to the conscious mind, and she went, that makes so much sense.
Wow. That's amazing. Did you know that you had this intuitive gift before 2020?
Well, that's kind of an interesting story. In my 40s, I realized you think you can just read people. You're like, you get a feeling about somebody. Everybody's got a hunch. If we listen, we'll all tap in. But I remember I was on a trip. I did a mother-daughter trip with my mom. We went up to St. Augustine, which is like the oldest city in Florida and has a reputation for a lot of haunted buildings. But she used to love like going to historic homes and gardens. And so we went into this one place. I think it was a jail, actually.
Oh gosh.
We were in there for maybe a minute and a half. And my mom goes, I'm getting a headache. I go, yeah, I feel something in my head. I don't want to be in here.
Mm.
And so we walked out of the building, and she goes, I don't feel good. I said, okay, mom, let's sit down. So we sat down on a bench, and I held her hand and I said, all right, I just want you to close your eyes and I just want you to pray for a minute that it'll shift. And so then I actually did the energy work to remove the entity that had attached to us, because lower force is attracted to light. And so then I said, okay, how do you feel now? She goes, I feel much better. And I go, we should probably talk, because I had never told her that I had a gift. And I was in my 40s. My mom is about 21 years older than me.
Wow.
And yeah. And so she told me that when she was a little girl, she used to see when people were going to pass, she could see their aura turn gray, and it scared her. And she was raised Catholic. And so
Yeah.
she was very afraid of her gift. And so she asked the divine to turn it off. And I don't want to see this anymore. So it went away. And then she went into traditional medicine. She eventually wound up running a hospital laboratory, but she went complete science the other way. I don't want to have anything to do with anything. And so it's really cool. She's really come full circle. When she started to go through the change of life, she was like, all right, there's nothing that's helping me with night sweats and all this discomfort. And she started to research naturopathic methods at that time.
Mm.
And so that's really, I think, what kind of brought her back to the other side. And so our relationship is great. My mom is like my best friend. So she is very supportive of the soul intelligence method. She actually has me do energy work on her now. She's not like scared. She gets it. And when my dad passed, I was getting messages and taps and things were happening. And I said, he's trying to talk to you, Mom. I go, why don't you ask to have your gift open again? I mean, you're retired. It's
Yeah.
okay. You're only hanging out with me. But like I said, it's just something that we all have. We just have to choose, which clair to tap into. For me, it's clairsentience. Like I get the chills, the truth chills, or a feeling first. I'm going to feel something. And she would see something. She had the clairvoyant piece.
Mm.
Some people hear the clairaudient. And my second is really claircognizance. That's really that knowing, which is for me, when you're alignment with your soul intelligence and you're on your mission, your vision, your values, your purpose, you're in alignment, that's when you're living your best life.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, because I can't imagine that you losing your job was really what started all this. And so I'm not surprised that maybe you were distracted and you didn't always use it and leverage it. But it's interesting. It helps me understand why I think you trusted what you heard or what you felt in terms of
Mhm.
the method. Can you just walk us more tactically through what a session would you maybe in person and also online would look like? Because you did mention that you do these virtually as well.
Yeah, so most of the time I do it via Zoom.
Okay.
So doctors love it when I say there's 100% compliance, meaning the patient's actually going to do what they need to do in order to get the work done, which basically means you just show up to a Zoom. That's it. And I just want you to be comfortable in a chair just so that you're relaxed. And you're either going to share with me what's going on with you, or I'm just going to ask to shift what's ever in your best and highest good. I mean, usually it's a combination of both anyway. I mean, usually the divine is really coming through me in order to tell me what needs to shift for that person. So I set up a sacred space, calling your guides in, my guides in, making sure that I'm connected to the divine and that we're in a good space to shift the energy. And the book of charts, the way it works is there's a table of contents that I have. And so once I get set up, I ask, okay, where do we start? And then I just start flipping through the charts depending on whether we're shifting toxic masculine or feminine energy, whether it's like an archetype or a pattern that's been going on in your life that needs to shift, whether it's a self-limiting belief where you don't believe you're good enough and that clouds your vision and creates this whole torrid story of wherever you've been in your life. So it's all of those things, or sometimes I'm using the physical charts, the medical charts. For example, I worked with a woman and she said to me, look, I haven't had a period in 3 months. And she's older. So she's like, I'm not pregnant, but I haven't had a period in 3 months. I don't want my husband to touch me. And I'm really struggling in my business. And I said, well, those things are all related. So let's look at your sacral chakra. Okay, that's the seat of womanhood. And that area was 90% blocked. So I spent the entire session clearing out what was in there. The very next morning, she sent me a text and she said, oh my God, I got my period last night. I let my husband hold me, and I had 3 new emails from new clients in my email. So she's like, you got everything flowing legitimately. Like,
I
so
love.
yeah, so it's like you can see something that quickly. And I try and describe it to people as look, you go to a chiropractor for a biomechanical adjustment to get your spine straight so that everything can flow properly. You come to me for a bioenergetic adjustment for the same reason, so that the spine might be able to course correct because we've moved that energy that's been pulling in the body up and out. And so it's a combination of all of those things.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Tell me again the name of your book, because I want people to.
sure. I have it right here, and it does look like me.
Healing Through Soul Intelligence. Love it.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it's available on Amazon. I also went out to LA and recorded it myself on Audible, which was a blast. I've had several people who have listened to the Audible and tell me it feels like they're actually getting a healing because it's in my voice. So
I
that's
love
kind of
that.
cool. Yeah, so it's also on Kindle, pretty much any format that you want, and certainly available on my website as well.
Yeah. What is your website if folks want to look and see how they can work with you?
Sure. It's Soul, Soul, soulintelligencemethod.com. And you can find out about sessions on there when I do free group work. You can also check out workshops. I have a course, which is what I'm really called to do in the world. I
Mhm.
really want to teach more people this method. I want to see this in wellness centers across the country.
That's wonderful. I definitely will include all the links in the show notes. Kristine, I love the work that you're doing. I think it's amazing that you're using your gifts and that you are really bringing this into wellness spaces, that you're helping people in person, online as well. And I can't wait to listen to your book. I do love listening to them and also getting the paper copy to write on them. And I think I'm very interested in scheduling a session. So I'll be
Woo!
reaching out. I think it'll be fun. Yeah, I love trying new modalities. I ask everyone a final question on the
Sure.
show, which is what does it mean to you to live the width of your life?
Well, I really think it's what I mentioned before, right? Being in alignment with your mission, your vision, your values, and your purpose, and you feel like you're part of something greater than yourself. And I really feel like soul intelligence gives me the opportunity to help heal people or help them on their healing journey and to make an impact in the world and to help raise the consciousness of the planet in general. Because when you heal yourself, there's that butterfly effect. Since we're all connected, the butterfly effect is if a butterfly immediately changes its course, natural course of flight, it could cause a tsunami on the other side of the world. So I always try and remind people, look, self-care isn't selfish, it's sacred. And when you start working on you, you don't just affect the people around you, you actually can impact people that you don't even know.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kristine. I've loved our conversation, and I'll be in touch very soon.
Absolutely. Aneta, thank you so much.